Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Marco Esters, and I'm a postdoc in the Cortorola group, and I'm part of the AFLOW team that is going to accompany you throughout this workshop for the next 4 days. With me is David Hicks, Andres Moyanuk, Corey Oses, and Cormac Tor, all part of the Cortorola group, part of the AFLOW team, and also Xinyan and Lisa Perez from Texas A&M. And welcome to the more or less informal prelude to the actual workshop, the command line primer for those of you who don't have much experience with the command line or no experience with the command line. So I will start introducing you a little bit to the basic features that you will need to navigate our workshop successfully. And this is all, as I said, fairly informal. We would take it easy because learning a command line it has a learning curve to it. It's very different to actually navigating a GUI that you might be used to, like a graphical user interface that you might be used to. And so we will take this all nice and slow. If I go too fast or if you have any questions, feel free to just write it in the chat. Or if you're curious about what you can do with the command line, apart from what I'm teaching you, feel free to just ask a few questions. And we start our formal program in an hour. Until then, we have plenty of time to play with the command line. You will learn how to navigate directories, look at content of directories, manipulate files a little bit, all the commands that you need to actually do the exercises in the further program. So without further ado, I will just go ahead and start. We'll all do this very interactively. So what I would ask you to do is log into your video portal. I will start sharing my screen to the video portal. I will give you all a few seconds to log in and start the video portal. And while you're doing that, as soon as you log in, you will see you have a day one folder on your desktop. And that day one folder contains all the files you need for today. And I want to especially make you aware of the command line primer directory. There's a presentation in here. It contains just a few commands that you will use today, that you will see today. This can serve as a reference for later. If you need to look up command that I'm showing you, you can look it up there and hopefully find what you're looking for. So now that hopefully you're all in the video portal, please, there's a Zoom banner right in front of what I was actually trying to click at. Click on Application, System Tools, and open a terminal. Let me increase the font size a little bit so everybody can hopefully see. Okay, this is the terminal. If it's too small, please let me know in the chat. Otherwise, I will assume that everybody can read what I'm showing here. But this is the terminal. It is complete. It's going to be operated exclusively with your keyboard, or mostly with your keyboard. You see this little tilde here. This is the directory you're in, and that tilde is your home directory. Home is basically your user directory. If you're coming from Windows, it is your user directory that you have on Windows. You can compare it with that. If you're coming from Mac, it's basically the same thing. It's /users, and then your user. So this is essentially the very, very same thing. And you have a directory in this home directory called desktop. And we will navigate to desktop right now. And the command that's associated with navigating and moving through directories is cd. cd means change directory. That's what it's short for. And we will type desktop. Desktop with a capital D. Linux command lines, Unix command lines are case sensitive. So if you type cd desktop, it will say no such file directory because the directory name is desktop with a capital D. So let's type cd desktop, and you will see that this name here, the tilde has changed to desktop. To look at the contents of a directory, you use the command ls. You see that we have something called day1 in here, and it's also the directory here. So you see the content of your desktop by using just ls. That's a very simple viewer of what is in your file. You can also go multiple levels. You don't have to go directory by directory every single time. So if we recall, if we open the day1 directory, there's a directory called 00_ command line primer. So let's go 2 levels and navigate through this. So cd day1, and what you do if you want to go multiple directories is you put a slash in between. Windows has backslash, but Linux and Mac both use a /. 00 command line primer. You actually don't need the trailing slash, but you can. And you see that the name here changed from desktop to 00 command line primer. You can look at the contents of the directory, and you see there's a command line primer PDF and exercises. And when you go in here, you see the exact same things. You see a directory called exercises and 00 command line primer.pdf. You see that they have different colors. A lot of terminals nowadays are color coded. So here directories are blue, whereas files here are green, but this is not universal across every terminal. Every terminal has their own color coding. You can even change the color coding. If you're a little more advanced, you can make it look the way you want. But here for our video portal, we have files in green and directories in blue. So let's go to the exercises directory. And I want to introduce you to something extremely useful, and that's called auto-completion. If you hit tab, it will try to auto-complete as much as possible. So you don't have to type every single directory out yourself. So if you just type CD, capital E, and you hit tab, it knows there's only one option, and that's exercises. So when you hit the tab button, it will auto-complete to exercises. So now that we're in the exercises directory, let's take a look at what's inside, again with ls. So there's a lorem ipsum.txt, there's a tag file, there's dir1 directory tree, and that's it. That's 3 files. So if you have a lot of files, this kind of compact view can be very cumbersome, and we may want to display everything as a list, and you can do that by doing ls-l. -l is an argument that tells you look at everything as a list. And there's a lot of information when you do that, though. You see all the directories here and the files here, and there's a bunch of information to the left. This one here, July 7, with a timestamp here, it shows how when it was changed last time. This one here is the file size. This one is your user group, and this one is your username. And all this stuff here gives you the permissions. This D in front of here also shows that it is a directory. So if your terminal doesn't support color coding, the D here at the front shows you that this is a directory, and this one here is a file. That is one way to look at it as a list, but you do get a lot more information, more than you might need. There's another thing that you can that I want you to be aware of, and that's hidden files. Some files can be hidden for multiple reasons, and when you do, in order to show them, you do ls-a. You see here there's a hidden file, this one here, that you didn't see before. When you compare ls and ls-a, you see that the hidden file is not there when you do ls, but it's there when you do ls-a. And you can also see that in Unix, hidden files are preceded by a dot. In Windows, it is a property of the file, but in Linux, you can hide a file with a dot in front of it. You can do the same thing with Mac. So I don't know if you ever got the flash drive that somebody used on a Mac before, and then look at it on Windows, you see a .Mac OS directory. In Mac, you don't see it because it's hidden, but in Windows, use a different notation. You can see these files. You can combine these command line arguments as well. So if you want ls-l, but also want to see the hidden files, you'd use ls-la. AL should give you the same thing. So in this case, it's not, the order doesn't really matter. There's two more things here that you see when you do ls-la. There's a dot, there's a dot. The dot is short for the current directory. So the directory you're in right now. And the dot is the directory above the parent directory. And we can go there by doing cd ... and you're in the command line primer directory. You can go to exercises, and you're back in the directory that you were before. Any questions so far? Is it too fast, too slow? Awkward silence, that means everybody is either completely lost or has no questions. Okay. Two more things about file navigation and directory navigation. There's one special directory, as I already mentioned, the tilde. And tilde is your home directory, and you can use it just like any other directory. You can go cd tilde, and you're back to your home directory. So now we went 3-4 layers deep, and to go back to your directory that you came from, you would technically have to do cd desktop, day 1, command line primer, exercises. Nobody wants to do that. Just because you went to home real quick, then you have to go all these layers back. So that's very cumbersome. I just hit Control-C to abort. I will talk more about Control-C later, but if you want to abort something, you hit Control-C. If you really want to abort something, you hit Control-C as much as possible until it stops. Control-C is not copying. So what can we do to avoid typing out all these directories and remembering where we came from? There's actually a very nice shortcut, and that is the dash. cd dash goes back to the directory you came from, and it prints out the directory that you came from before. So cd dash switches between your last visited directory, and you can do this back and forth. cd dash gets you back to home, and when you do cd dash again, you get back to the exercises, etc. So these are the what else? Oh yeah, ls. You don't just have to do ls on your current directory. You can also do ls on any directory, such as ls. Let's do dir one, and you see the content of that directory. So you don't have to go to the directory first and then type ls. You can also just designate the directory that you're actually trying to look at. I'll give you 1 or 2 minutes maybe to be more comfortable with cd and ls, maybe move through the directories a little bit and do ls, and let me know if you have any questions. If you don't have any more questions, we will go ahead and do some file manipulation, copying, moving, removing, and renaming. So 1 or 2 minutes, just playing around, moving around, and then we will go back to the exercises directory and move on to the next session. Okay, uh, 1 to 2 minutes are over, so let's move to file manipulation and directory creation. So the command line can do a whole lot more than just looking at directories and moving in between directories. The most interesting part is actually doing something with the files that reside in there. And so let's start by creating a new directory that we can use as our playground. So let's call this, let's create the directory, and the command for that is mkdir, make directory. And let's just be creative and call this directory dir2. So this directory is empty. You can see by doing ls dir2, there's nothing in there because we just created a new directory. It's a new folder and there's nothing inside. So let's put something inside. I already showed dir has a bunch of files. So let's copy one of the files in there. And to do that, use the command cp. Cp short for copy, and you can do dir1 slash, because we're going into the directory. And let's take the file lorem.txt. In order to copy it, we just do dir2 slash. And if you look at the contents of directory 2, we have the file lorem in there, lorem.txt. How can we copy this in a with a different file name? We can just do dir1, let's take ipsum.txt, dir2, and let's just call that one test.txt. And when you check the content of dir2, you see that it's not, the file is not called ipsum.txt, it's called test.txt. So this is a way to copy and rename it at the same time. So let's do something else. Let's do cut and paste. One way to cut and paste a file is actually, let's stay up here. dir1 $.txt dir2. MV means move. So you're cutting and pasting, that's the same thing as a moving operation. So you do this, you'll see that in dir2, $.txt is inside dir2. Now let's check dir1. That file is gone. We cut and pasted, we moved it over. So it's not in the original directory, and it's now in the directory that you moved it into. So what about, let's copy the, actually let's do some, yeah, let's copy the directory. So cp dir2, let's call it dir3. We want to have an exact copy. And it will give you a very ominous message, omitting directory dir2. So why is it ignoring my copy command? CP is just for copying files. If you want to copy a directory, you need to use the argument -r. So dir2 to dir3. That will do it. Let's make sure that I was not lying to you. Here you see dir1, dir2, and dir3. And let's compare the content. You see 3 files that we have in dir2, and the same files are also in dir3. So CP for copy, CP-R for copying directories, and CP for copying regular files. So if you ever see the problem omitting directory, it's because you didn't use the -R option. How do we now? The last thing I want to show you about file manipulation is removing files, deleting them. So let's go to cd directory 3, and we want to remove test.txt, for example. To do that, we use the command rm. RM is short for remove. And if you look at the content of the directory, test is gone. A warning, especially for Windows users who are used to having a recycling bin. Remove in Linux is permanent. Unless you have a setting in your system that warns you, removing removes the file for good. So be careful with that command. Absolutely careful with that command. If you remove it, it's typically gone, and you have to, hopefully you have a system administrator that has a backup and can restore it for you. But removing, be absolutely careful with how you use that command. So let's get out of that directory and let's remove dir3. And as you may have guessed, removing dir3 gives you an error because it is a directory. And as you may have guessed as well, you need to use the -r directive to actually remove that directory. As you can see, it is gone from your directory here. And that's it. Oh yeah, you can also move directories. And just to confuse people, moving doesn't require the -r. So mv dir2 dir3 works without the -r directory. So that's something that you just need to keep in mind, that moving doesn't require any -r, but removing does, and copying does too. One last thing I want to mention about autocomplete, actually, while I have the directory tree here. Autocomplete is very helpful, but it also, I want to show you a little bit of the limitations of what autocomplete can do. So when we look at the directory tree, I'm actually going now to the GUI here. We see it just has multiple layers, and then it ends up with 3 directories that are called directory 1, 2, and 3. So when you do cv directory tree, I only need to type direct or even dir, and it knows how to autocomplete. There's only one directory inside that directory tree. It has layer 1, 2, and 3. You can hit tab, and there's only one directory. It knows where to go. And then we are in layer 3, and then it just says directory. Because it doesn't know how to autocomplete. It's ambiguous. You have 1, 2, and 3, and it doesn't know exactly where to go. If you keep hitting tab, it will show you all the options that you have. So let's say we want to go to directory 1. I think there's nothing in there. There's nothing in there. It's just showing you a little bit more how autocomplete works. And now that you're in here, we can go out using as many like double dots as we went down, but that, as I said, is kind of cumbersome, so we can just do speed dash to get back to the exercises directory. So why don't I let you go ahead and play again a little bit with moving and removing. Please don't remove dir1. That's an important directory later for the exercises. Make a safe copy of dir1 before you move anything or remove anything, because as I said, it is permanent, and I can help you if you remove dir1. So maybe one or 2 minutes just to play around and copy, and then we will talk about how to actually manipulate or look at the contents of a file and how to concatenate and redirect. Yeah, Lisa, this is Lisa just sent into the chat. If you accidentally delete day one, delete day one directory, she can recover it for you. This is the advantage of having a system administrator who can do that. If you have your own personal Linux computer and you do that, there's not necessarily a coming back. But don't rely on a system administrator. It's better to be careful. Yes, thanks, Lisa. We want to recover the original files, so it relies on you having an actual backup. There's no live backup. So anything that you do and then remove will be gone forever. Okay. Any questions? Doesn't seem to be the case. So now that we learned a little bit about manipulating files and navigating through directories, we actually want to know what's inside them. And for that, we are going to the directory dir1. See dir1. And look at the content, and we have a few files inside. And if we want to look at the content of, for example, lorem.txt, we use the command cat. Cat outputs the contents of a file onto the screen. Of course, be fairly careful, because if you have a large file, we get a ton of output. But these files are fairly small, so you'll be okay just outputting them. You can also output multiple files. For example, lorem.txt. That's why autocomplete is helpful. It kind of minimizes the typos. And let's also do ipsum. And you see it will output to both files. So here it starts with lorem ipsum, and in aliquam is the ipsum file, and we can verify this by outputting them separately, cat lorem and cat ipsum. You see the two contents of the file. Here it starts with lorem ipsum, and here it starts with in aliquam. You can also output all files in one directory by using star. Star is a wildcard that will match everything. And here we see a ton of output, because these are all the files in this directory. Be careful with star, especially when you use it in conjunction with remove. It means remove. RM star means remove everything. Again, with the lack of recovery that you have, sometimes be really careful with what that star does. And when you output all files, and the files are all very big, you will end up outputting a lot of stuff, and you might actually freeze your computer if you exaggerate. And yeah, this is cat. You can output files using cat. You can also output a string into the screen, which is, we use echo for that. Let's do echo hello world, because it's kind of the standard thing to do. And gosh, if I'm not found, let's do single quote. There it is. Depending on your operating system, double quotes may do something different. Single quotes are a little safer. I just have a habit of using double quotes. So echo hello world with a single quote does it here in this terminal. This just outputs the string. So why would we ever want to do that? In a script, sometimes when you write a script, you can echo certain outputs just to make you aware of what that script is doing. And that's essentially what you can do to output stuff onto your screen. What's really useful, besides looking at what a file, how a file looks like, what the contents is using so-called redirects. And we're going to use redirects occasionally in this tutorial. And there are two forms of redirects. One is a so-called pipe, and one is like the greater than and lower than signs. So I'll show you the pipe first. And to do that, we output the contents of a file. Let's do a smaller file with like the hidden file in your directory above. You found the hidden file. Hidden files always start with a dot at the beginning of the file name. And we are going to output this into another program. So we want to take the string that's inside the hidden file and want to do something else with it. And to do that, you're using that, that bar, the pipe, and you put it into a different program. In this case, TAC. TAC takes the input and reverses it, because TAC is cat in reverse. And here you see when you do that, this file here now starts with the last line and ends with the first line. That's what TAC does, but the pipe essentially takes the input from the output from the hidden file and kind of pipes it, that's what the name comes from, into that command TAC. There's also a, and at least for many systems this works, another way to do this is by using that funnel and just have the hidden file move in here, does the same thing. I'm using the word funnel because it really visualizes what it does. You are funneling the contents of hidden file into the command TAC. There's both of these work very well. You can also do this with echo. You can echo something into a pipe. That is completely acceptable. And you can also funnel an echo output into a into a command. You can do more with these funnels though, and with cat, and that is, for example, concatenating files. So let's do cat lorem.txt, and we're funneling this into, let's say, lorem2.txt. Now let's look at the contents of both files. Lorem.txt is this whole lorem ipsum string, and cat lorem2.txt is the same string again. So you might say, how is this useful? I might just use copy and you'd be right about that, but where this actually becomes very handy is when you concatenate files, so put them together, or when you want to append a file to a next. So one way to concatenate files is to do cat lorem.txt and then ipsum.txt, which, as we saw earlier, outputs both of them right onto the screen, first lorem and then ipsum, and now we funnel this into a file, let's say lorem_ipsum.txt. There's no output, but if we actually look at the file, you see that both of them have been put together into this new file. So now let's see what we have in here. Let's say we want to now decide we want to put another file at the end of lorem ipsum, and we do cat sit.txt, and we funnel this to lorem ipsum.txt, and look at the output. This is not what we were expecting when we do that, because we would have expected the content of all three files to be there if the funneling was doing what I was telling you it was going to do. And that's because that funneling operator overwrites whatever you give it. It doesn't append. So I will show you how to actually append the file. So let's restore what we had before. Lorem ipsum.txt So now what do we do to append sit in there? First, I will show you that we actually have lorem ipsum back here. It's again the lorem ipsum and then the in aliquam. So now how do we append the sit file? You do that by using the double funnel. The double funnel appends to the file. And we can check that this actually did what we had to do, so what we wanted to do, so you can verify that the double funnel actually appended. And here you see we have a paragraph called lorem ipsum, then we have in aliquam, and then we have I think Orsi various is where cras congue is how it started. So this is what you do to append a file, or append to a file using cat. That's what cat is also very helpful for, besides just outputting to screen. And as I said, they also work with echo. We can echo hello world and append it to lorem ipsum. And when we cat lorem ipsum, you see at the end you have hello world. So echo and redirecting are independent, and you can do the same thing with echo almost that you can do with cat, except for echo operates on a string and cat operates on a file or the content of a file. Before I let you play and go with the exercises, there is going to be an exercise. I want to show you a few more little tricks that we can do, or a few more things you should be aware of. We already talked about auto completion. I already also talked about Control-C. So if I decide to not wanting to do any concatenation, and I'm too lazy to just hit the backspace button, I can hit Control-C, and that carry C sometimes shows up, and that cancels what you're doing. It also cancels a running process. So if you're removing something and you're in your panic realizing that was a bad idea, you can hit Control-C and it stops the removal process, even though it may have removed some files already, but any process can be stopped with Control-C. Another thing that I was kind of doing that may not be as self-explanatory is you can use the arrow keys to navigate in this terminal. Let's say I don't want to use lorem. I can use the arrow keys to edit my command, and here home and end work as well. You can use arrow right and arrow left. And the other arrow keys down and up cycle through your previous command. So if you have a long command, you don't have to retype it. You can, with your arrow up, you can just cycle through all the commands that you did before, up and down, and just go through your history of commands and potentially repeat it. And instead of moving all the way back, I just hit Control-C and I'm done with this. So let me share the exercise that I will have you do, maybe for 10 minutes, and then I will go through it. Here's the exercise. So we will start in the exercise directory, and create a new directory called exercise, navigate into the directory, copy the lorem file, concatenate the contents of lorem and sit into a new file, append the contents of sit again from dir1 to the new file, and then at the end I want you to hide the file. And remember what the convention is for a hidden file in Linux, and think about how you might get to hiding that file in the command line. Okay, I will start sharing my video portal again. And the first thing to do was to create the exercise, a directory called exercise, and This is done with mkdir exercise, exercise. And navigate in here, I'm going to use autocomplete tab to get in here. Then copy the file lorem from the dir directory. Here, it's done with cp lorem.txt, and we just want to copy it into the directory, and we use the dot as the current directory to get there. And then concatenate the files from lorem.txt and the sit of dir1 into a new file. Let's just call it new file.txt. And you can see that the contents is the combination of the two. And if we want to append sit again, we use the double funnel to the new file. And you can see that it concatenates the file. You see here, there's sit twice. And lorem ipsum, lorem is up here. And the last thing to do was to hide the file, and to hide the file, we need to give it a dot in front of it as the first character. So we just rename it and move it new file.txt to dot new file.txt. And to show that it's actually hidden, ls just says lorem and not lorem and new file, but when you do ls-a, we see that new file is here in the file list. And you can see also sometimes files are just black. It depends on the permissions what color coding it has. But that's not too important. What you need to know is that blue essentially in this terminal is color coded as a directory. The rest are files. That's all you need to really remember.